Hey guys, John here. It's finally time for my new reactive load comparison. I've been wanting to do this for quite a while, and this is definitely going to be very interesting and also shocking, trust me. In this video, we're going to compare these 5 load boxes, and we're going to compare them with 2 different amplifiers. A classic crunch amplifier, which is my Marshall Mini Plexi, the SV20H, and my Mesa Boogie Single Rectifier. So that's like the modern amplifier for the high gain tones. With the topic of today's video relating to tube amplifiers, this video is sponsored by Amplified Parts. They're a US-based retailer that specializes in components for amps and guitars. Think of tubes, hardware, and all that good stuff. They have an easy-to-use website that allows you to hone in on exactly what you're looking for, whether it's a new set of tubes or hardware to customize your guitar or amplifier. They also have fast same-day shipping. For viewers of my channel, they are offering a discount code on your order. Use code SonicDrive10 for 10% off your order. So thanks a bunch to Amplified Parts for sponsoring this video. Really appreciate it, and you guys definitely check out their website. I actually asked my buddy Miko from ML Sound Lab about this because I know that he has a lot of experience with reactive loads, and I asked him which amps would be like the amps that would exaggerate the tonal differences between all the load boxes the most, and he said a Plexi and a rectifier. So that's what I ended up with, and yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting. So the 5 loads that we're going to compare today are the RedSeven Amp Central reactive load, which I've used in countless videos. It has been my workhorse. I love this thing. The Saint Rock React IR2, which I got recently. I reviewed this on the channel. It's an awesome device. The Fractal Audio LB2X load, which I have had for many years in my studio, and I've used this on my channel a lot as well. A very solid box. Then the Driftwood reactive load, which I got recently. And of course, the 2 Notes Captor X. Now you might ask yourself, what is a reactive load or a load box? I'm going to try to explain this to you in very simple terms. Usually, a tube amplifier or an amplifier head in general will be connected to a speaker cabinet, right? And it will be very loud when you turn it up. And when you want to record that amplifier, you're going to have to mic up your cabinet and get the mic signal into your interface. And yeah, you're going to have to make a bunch of noise. With a reactive load, you can plug your amplifier into the load instead of a cabinet and then run the direct signal into your computer without the need of an actual speaker. So that means you can play through a reactive load or record silently, which comes with many benefits aside from it being silent. You can record at night, of course, but you can also change the impulse responses or cabinet simulations after the fact and stuff like that. Add effects and stuff, and some of these devices also have attenuator functionality and effects loops. So I use these devices a lot. I love them. I live in a normal house here, so I can't crank up my amplifier through my real cab every day. So these come in very handy. And yeah, if you know this channel, you already know this, but reactive loads are awesome. Now, as the name implies, these loads are reactive loads, which means that there's an interaction between the amp head and the load, just as there would be an interaction between a tube amplifier and an actual cabinet loaded with speakers. And that is called impedance interaction. And what basically happens with a tube amplifier connected to a real cabinet is that the speakers in the cabinet will have an impact on the tone of the amplifier. And that tone is basically called an impedance curve. And all these load boxes have their own impedance curves, and that's why they all sound different. Some of them will sound more bright, for example. Others will have a bit more of a thumpy low end, etc. And that's basically what this video is going to be about. But later in the video, I'll also talk a little bit about the different features that they have to offer. Because some of them are very bare bones and simple, and others have a lot of additional functionality. Okay, let's just start with a comparison now. And I'm going to use my Gibson Les Paul Standard 60s with the JB in the bridge through the Marshall SV20H, which is the Mini Plexi. And that's a non-master volume Marshall, so it's a very loud amplifier. Sure, it's the 20-watt version, but it's still mega loud. And it's great for that classic rock crunch. And since it's a non-master volume amp, I thought it would be a suitable amplifier to use in this comparison. Because those EL34s are going to be cranked to hell, and the reactive loads might react differently to that, so that's going to be interesting. I'll do some segments with a full band mix, which in my opinion is very important, but also some isolated segments that you can hear the guitars by themselves. I also want to add that I'm using the exact same impulse response for each reactive load, which is an ML Sound Lab IR from the Mega Green cabinet. the classic mix to be precise. I'm using my Fractal Audio FM9 as the audio interface, so the DI signals from the guitars are being sent from that into the amplifier. Then the signal from the amp is going into the reactive loads, and that signal is being fed back into the FM9 where I'm applying the IR processing. I did that today because I want to keep everything consistent, but of course some of these reactive loads also allow you to load your IRs directly onto the units, which is great for live shows and stuff like that. For my personal use, I usually don't do that. I usually just do the IR processing either in my DAW or in my Fractal device. Okay, let's go ahead and take a listen right now. All right, that was interesting. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I could definitely hear some differences here and there. Some of the differences definitely could be called subtle, while others, not so much. Now, overall, the RedSeven sounded great. There's a reason why I've used it for so many videos with so many of my amplifiers in the past. It just sounds solid and it really works with a lot of different types of amplifiers. Of course, I had it set to the reactive mode. You can also set it to resistive load, which will sound less realistic. So I always have it set to the reactive load function. The Fractal LB2 also sounded great here, very solid. I had it set to the UK voicing. So this thing has two voicings, a US voicing, which is basically like a Fender combo with 10-inch speakers, I believe, and the UK voicing, which is a V30 loaded cabinet voicing. And yeah, this one sounded very solid indeed. No complaints there. The Driftwood, which is the newest addition to my reactive load pile, so to speak, also sounded pretty solid, but a bit more of a smooth top end. So this is going to work well with amplifiers that tend to be very bright. Or if you want to tune your amplifier into the voicing of the reactive load. In the case of the Driftwood, you might have to crank the treble and presence a little bit or use a brighter IR. And then the Saint Rock React IR2, which is also fairly new, sounded really good here as well. Really solid. This thing has multiple options, but I have it set to the reactive mode as well and to mode 2, which also has the low end resonance going on just as the other loads. And then the two Notes Captor X sounded the most flat, and yeah, it definitely didn't sound as realistic and three-dimensional as the other ones, especially in the low-end response. The dynamics were just off, basically. Most of them definitely didn't sound horrible though, and with some tweaks here and there, you could make most of them sound pretty great. Now let's go over some of the features that these reactive loads have to offer. I'm not going to be able to go over all the features, but I've done a bunch of reviews on most of these devices. And of course, you can also check out the websites of the manufacturers for all the information. But the RedSeven is an awesome device. As I said, I've used it in many videos. I've also done a review of this on the channel. And the overall impedance interaction just sounds really good on this thing. It works really well with all of my amplifiers, basically. I usually use this as a passive load, so without the power even on. But of course, you can load your IRs onto this. It has an effects loop, XLR stereo out. It has this switch where you can go between reactive and resistive load. And it's a sturdy unit and not as heavy as some of the other ones. The Fractal Audio LB2X load reactive load is very solid and very sturdy. It's very simple. It has this level control. And as I said, the US and UK voicing switch. You have an XLR out, which you will need to power the unit for with phantom power, or the passive out, which I always use. So without the power, and it works just fine. But yeah, it's very stripped down, but it does indeed sound very solid. What I have noticed with this thing is that I have to crank the DI level control quite a bit to get the best tone out of it. So if you were to set this quite low, like this for example, the sound is going to get a little bit muddy and dark. So I always prefer to have it set at least at around 2 or 3 o'clock for the best tone. Now the Driftwood reactive load is very simple. It's the most simple one. There's an input where you put the output of your speaker into, and then the DI out, and there's a little pad switch over here to attenuate the level. So yeah, it's very simple indeed, but nice and sturdy. And then the Saint Rock React IR2, which is a very impressive unit and quite sturdy as well, which I recently reviewed on the channel. Check out that review if you're interested. But yeah, this thing is awesome. You can load a bunch of IRs, I think around 150 or so. You can load up to 4 IRs at once, which is impressive. The IR quality is very high, which is not something that you see often with reactive loads. It comes with a noise gate built in, reverb, and all that stuff. So it has a bunch of DSP built in. And you can also control it via Bluetooth with an app on your phone and change all the settings there. It's quite an impressive unit. And I think that the overall sound is quite solid. And just as with the RedSeven, it also has an effects loop, which is cool. I mean, you can use that for amplifiers with no effects loop to add delay and reverb and stuff after the amp. So that's really nice. And then the two Notes Captor X, it's the one that most people have. This is the 8 ohm version. I mean, it's a fun device. I don't really like the sound of the impedance curve on this thing. And I think that the menus in the app and the computer program are a little bit clunky, and it has a lot of features, but maybe a little bit too much. Yeah, you have stuff like, room reverbs, delays. You can load various IRs. They have a bunch of like 2 Notes IRs in their store. So there are a lot of options, and I'm sure you can get some great tones out of it, but it may require a little bit more work. But you can also use this one as an attenuator, and the Saint Rock React IR also, by the way. So yeah, it's a very capable device. It just sounds the least flattering, in my opinion. Okay, let's carry on with the comparison. Now I'm going to do a high gain tone with my Schecter PT SLS Elite with the Fishman Fluence modern pickups in it, through the Mesa Boogie Single Rectifier 50 Series 1, on the red channel with the modern mode, which is the most aggressive and metal sounding mode on the amplifier. Now this amplifier is definitely going to exaggerate the differences between these load boxes here. If I were to use another amplifier, as the Plexi, for example, the differences would be more subtle. So that's something to keep in mind. You're going to hear some pretty drastic differences between all these load boxes. And a part of that definitely has to do with the fact that I'm using the rectifier. So keep that in mind. And now I'm using a different IR from ML Sound Lab, by the way. This time I'm using the mega oversized cabinet with the almighty mic mix, which is based on a Mesa Boogie 4x12 cabinet. Okay, let's take a listen. Full band examples as well as isolated segments. Check it out. Whoa, those differences were huge in some cases. This is a little bit shocking, to be honest. I mean, you can definitely hear how much of an impact a reactive load can have on your tone. It's quite crazy. Now we started with the RedSeven again, which sounded solid. I've used it with so many amplifiers, basically all my amplifiers, and I'm always getting great tones. It has a very even sound, but perhaps in this case, some of the other loads have a bit more forward mids going on. The Fractal Audio LB2X load sounded very good here, very solid. It basically pushed all the right frequencies forward in the mix, and it sounded just very chunky and still had a huge bottom end, but a little bit more tight, perhaps. Then the Driftwood was quite dark sounding here, a little bit muddy, to be honest. And again, the difference between this one and the others was more exaggerated with this amplifier, but I still would recommend that if you use the Driftwood, you either use a bright amplifier or you fine-tune the sound or the controls on your amplifier or the IR that you're using to this thing. So if you're a fan of a smooth top end, this could be, the best one for you. But for the rectifier, it sounded a little bit too dark for my taste. And I wanted to keep the settings consistent, of course, so I did not change the amp settings at all in between the reactive loads. And then the Saint Rock React IR2 sounded great here. Very similar to the Fractal in terms of the brightness and the mid-range. Not exactly the same, but very close. So that one was impressive as well. And then again, just as with the Marshall, the two notes just sounded a little bit flat. And yeah, not really flattering, to be honest. So yeah, to me, that was quite shocking. I didn't expect the differences to be that big. So I guess one lesson that you can learn from this is that it perhaps could be useful to have multiple reactive loads in your arsenal, because some might work well with a certain type of amplifiers, while others might work well with a different type of amplifier. So yeah, this was very interesting. Let me know in the comments down below what your thoughts are. That's all for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and thanks to my sponsor Amplified Parts for sponsoring this video. Drop a like and subscribe down below, as that also really helps the channel out, and follow me on Facebook and Instagram as well. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you soon. Cheers!